All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning, parents. My name is Christy Somerville Majette. I'm your division superintendent. On the call this morning, we have Ms. Tracy Rogers, our assistant superintendent of instruction, and Mrs. Crystal Pearson, our director of technology. And the purpose of this video is to provide some feedback, to provide some information, some guidance to parents based on our plans for the reopening of school, because we know that this is a big question for everyone. What is this going to look like for Brunswick County Public Schools? So to give you a little bit of background, back when schools closed and we realized we were closing for the remainder of the year, we started thinking about what is this going to look like for us for next year. So we have some really dedicated educators in the school division who formed task force teams to come up with preliminary plans, even before, long before the governor and the state superintendent provided their guidance. And one of the reasons for doing that, we had to make sure that we looked at plans and models that what is this going to look like for Brunswick County and what's going to work for us. So with that, they developed 3 plans. One, school back to school as usual, as if COVID-19 never happened. The second plan was a hybrid model, which would be a mixture of in-person learning as usual and virtual remote learning for our students. And then they also looked at a totally virtual remote model of students learning new instruction, but at home. So with that, as the governor and the state superintendent provided their guidance last week, we wanted to share a little bit of this information with you all. And I know that we've all been monitoring it. We were in phase 1 and now we're currently in phase 2. And so I'd like to just sort of give you a brief overview of the phases. Mrs. Rogers is going to come in and talk to you about the preliminary plans from the task force teams. And Mrs. Pearson is going to let you know how this is all going to work when you think about the technological needs of not just Brunswick County, but small rural communities. Please note as we go through this, our number one concern, always we want to make sure that we provide a quality education for all of our students. But in light of these unprecedented times in this global pandemic, our number one goal is to keep your child safe. So as you look at these plans, please keep in mind that the goal is to educate your student, but educate them in a safe environment. So at this time, we're going to move into our presentation. Okay. So when you start thinking about what school is going to look like for next year, I think for many of us as adults, and then you even think about our students, school for all students next year is going to reopen. We plan to reopen on time, but it's going to have to look very different. And again, as I mentioned earlier, we are starting new instruction for our students. So we're going to need all students and parents and families to continue to be engaged, to be even more so engaged with this new era of education. So Virginia School Return to School Plan. Of course, this is guidance from the governor. It's going to align school reopening phases with the blueprint. It's going to beef up our opportunities, increase our opportunities for in-person instruction beginning immediately. It's also looking at addressing health, social, and emotional, and physical well-being of our students. And then we want to make sure that we take care of our most vulnerable learners where in-person instruction is extremely essential. Okay, so as I said earlier, we're beyond phase 1, so we want to talk about what phase 2 looks like. Instruction will be still predominantly remote in this phase. I know Mrs. Rogers and the principals are working on gathering information for summer school right now that'll start in July. And we're looking at that, just doing that virtually. So if you haven't provided your feedback on that, please connect with Mrs. Rogers or your child's principal so that they can get that information and get your child into summer school. So those phase 1 options are going to continue. In-person instruction, like I said, may be offered for students with disabilities. our preschool through third grade students, and English language learners. The social distancing measures are still in place, 6-foot separation when possible, being restrictive of mixing groups of students, a 50-person limit on large gatherings, and then looking at closed communal spaces to keep that distance there, and making sure that we're staggering the use and properly disinfecting between uses, and limiting extracurricular activities and athletics with mitigation strategies. So I want to, before moving on to phase 3, I want to mention athletics. One of the things that is in the process of happening, VHSL, the Virginia High School League, has not provided their guidance yet as to what sports will look like in the fall. So while we've been given the opportunity to look at athletics and looking at practices, we're actually meeting as a team. I'm meeting with the middle school and high school administrative team as well, with their athletic directors, because we have to look through and make sure that we have a plan in place, that we're going to have proper mitigation strategies to keep our students safe. So what is going to be our process for making sure that we're wiping down equipment, that we're keeping these kids at an appropriate distance, you know, looking out for their overall health and well-being. So I know that there have been questions about the athletics, but that is a process, and we want to make sure we have a plan in place to not only get your student engaged in that activity, but to make sure that we can keep your child safe in that process. Okay. So phase 3. Phase 3, and this is what phase 3 looks like. And when I want you to think about with phase 3, more instruction will shift to include more in-person instruction for any student. Remote instruction will supplement the in-person instruction for students. So when you start looking at this phase 3 guidance, we have not entered phase 3 yet, but as we start to move forward, we sort of anticipate that phase 3 will be here once school reopens in August. So with that, we want to go through those plans today so that we have this in place so that you understand what this is going to look like, because this is going to be what we consider our hybrid model. So we have to make sure that we offer proper social distancing, possibly staggered schedules for students. We're going to have to look at that 6-foot separation when possible. There are going to be large gathering limits, restrictions on mixing groups. We're going to have to adjust schedules, our transitions between schedules. And again, we'll have more guidance in terms of athletics and extracurricular activities once we get to that phase. But for the purposes of this video, because you'll get a survey at the end that we're going to need each parent to complete, and it'll be a short survey, but we need to get some feedback from you. While we've worked through to try to adjust things based on the government's guidance, we still need your feedback to look at this to make sure that we're going to keep your child safe, that we'll fall within these guidelines, but that we hear your voices and can make adjustments accordingly based on the feedback that you provide. Okay, so there are a few precautions that apply to all phases. Daily health screenings of students and staff, providing remote learning exceptions and teleworking for students and staff who are high at risk for severe illnesses, the use of face coverings by staff when you're at least 6 feet physical distancing cannot be maintained. And then the use of face coverings for students as developmentally appropriate when physical distancing cannot be maintained. So we're just making sure that we are going to follow the CDC guidelines for schools and really enhance our social and physical distancing, health and hygiene procedures, cleaning and disinfecting measures, and other mitigation strategies, because as I said earlier, our primary goal is to keep your students safe. Okay, so at this time, I'm going to turn this over to Mrs. Rogers, our Assistant Superintendent for Instruction, and she's going to cover the instructional return to school plan, the draft plan with you all today.
Thank you, Dr. Majette, and good morning, everyone. I want to reemphasize that this is a draft at this time. As Dr. Majette mentioned, our task force created 3 different plans back in May. And now they are combing through the guidance document from DOE, the 136-page guidance document from DOE, to make sure that we align our plans to that guidance document. So we are looking at the hybrid model, as Dr. Majette mentioned. Students will attend school at least one day a week in pre-K through 8th grade. Students in grades pre-K through 3 will have more face-to-face instruction in school based on the research that indicates that virtual instruction is not as effective for this age group. They are not as developmentally ready for all virtual learning. Special needs students will also have more face-to-face instruction in school, and high school students will participate in most classes virtually, with certain CTE or lab classes offered face-to-face for hands-on activities. We know that we have to take the safety measures, as Dr. Majette has mentioned. Students and staff will be screened each day that they enter the school. Social distancing will be required on both school buses and classrooms. Students will maintain social distancing of 6 feet as much as possible, and face masks will be worn when social distancing is not possible. Frequent hand washing and the use of hand sanitizer will occur throughout the school day. Materials will not be shared among students, and meals will be served in the classrooms. This is a model of what the bus may look like, staggering students on the bus to maximize the number that we can bring to school each day, but also maintaining that social distancing.
Okay. And if you could leave it, do you mind if I interject about the buses?
Please.
So as we start looking through the instructional plans, and one of the governor and even mostly the state superintendent's focus is, of course, we eventually want to get beyond phase 3 when we enter there and go beyond phase 3 where we can bring all of our students back to school and, you know, and go back to, I don't know if we'll ever go back to the traditional, but to be at a point where we can have that traditional learning in place and have all students with us every day. But in looking at that, we started a lot of the focus is getting that pre-K through 3 group in to make sure that we are working with, because they're early readers, they're developing, they're growing, and to make sure that we're maximizing that instructional time with that group. And so with that, one thing that may come up, and we're looking at it now as we explore bus routes, is looking at possibly submitting a variance to the state to ask for approval when we're looking at some of the earlier students, the younger students, to possibly look at maybe 1 student per seat in some of the earlier grade levels, because those students are much smaller, and making sure that they have appropriate face coverings so that we could possibly get a few more students on the bus. Of course, we would go through, look at CDC guidelines, we would talk with the Virginia Department of Health before submitting any type of plan like that and get their approval. But that is something that we are considering when we look at trying to get those earlier grade students in for more face-to-face instructional time, which is greatly needed for them. So I did want to say that to parents to understand that that is something that we're exploring. It's not a definite, but we definitely, as you look at this diagram, you see the seat that skipped in between the every other, and we may need to make some adjustments when we start looking at some of the younger students. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. The next diagram is just a sample of what an elementary classroom may look like set up with the 6-foot distancing between the student desk. And again, we will not share materials among the students. They would have their own set of materials, and we will do everything that we can to maintain 6 feet of distancing. And when it cannot be maintained, then yes, masks will be asked to be worn by the teacher and the students as developmentally appropriate, recognizing that the younger children may not be able to wear them all day as the older children may be able to. The next screen will show you again a sample of a middle school classroom, very similar. Changes only in where teacher desks may be located, interactive panels in the classroom and so forth, but still maintaining that distance. But you can see from these models that we're able to get between 8 and 10 students in a classroom at a time, but based on the size of the classroom. So there may be a few classrooms a little smaller that only 8 desks are able to fit in that classroom. But we wanted to give you an example of what the room would look like, the setup, and the next screen will show you an example for the high school. So again, very similar These are larger students. So again, based on the size of the classroom, anywhere between 8 to 10 desks should be able to fit in each room and maintain the 6 foot of social distancing. Again, we will limit the number of students on each bus, staggering their seating, as Dr. Majes just mentioned. Masks will be worn while riding the buses. We will follow the CDC guidelines for disinfecting and cleaning classrooms, restrooms, other common areas, and the buses. And we recognize that some students may have health conditions that put them at a higher risk for COVID-19. So we will work with these parents to provide virtual instruction and instructional packets to meet the needs of their students. As Dr. Majette also mentioned, by DOE guidelines, we are required to introduce new instruction when we open school. When we closed school back in March, we maintain a continuity of learning and try to continue to just maintain that continuity for our students. But there was not a lot of new instruction introduced at that time because we knew not all students had the same access to that instruction. So in the fall, when we reopen, grades will be taken on assignments and assessments. We also know that there was a lapse of instruction at the end of the year, so teachers have embedded missed content into their pacing guide for the upcoming year. And in addition, time for remediation will be available for students as needed. So at the elementary level, a sample schedule would be hopefully students in grades pre-K through 3 attending school 2 to 3 days a week. Grades 4 and 5 students would attend school 1 day a week. And again, that is based on what we are able to do with the number of buses, how many students we can feasibly bring to school on each day, and how we can space them out within the school building, because one classroom will now be split into 2 or even 3 classes, depending on that class size. The days that students are not in school, they will participate in virtual learning and complete written assignments and activities from the teachers. At the middle school level, we're looking at 1/3 of each grade level coming 1 day each week. So all students would attend at least 1 day each week, 1/3 of each grade level at a time. And the remainder of the week, they will be involved in virtual learning and the completion of written work as assigned by the teacher. And elective classes may be held virtually 2 days a week. At the high school, due to the variety of schedules of high school students, it was very difficult to create a schedule to bring in students 1 day a week. So the majority of their classes will be taught virtually. We are implementing a modified block schedule with 4 classes taught on Monday and Thursday of each week, and a different set of classes taught on Tuesday and Friday. So students will still be able to get in their 8 credits, but this will spread the classes out for the full year. We're not sure how long phase 3 may last, whether it will end at first semester or go into second semester, but this allows us to spread out all classes all year, allow us more time for remediation and to meet the needs of the students before they will finish the requirements for each class. So they will still get the same number of credits. It will just be year long, and they will do 4 classes on Monday and Thursday and 4 different classes on Tuesday and Friday. And again, on those virtual learning days, our teachers are going to use a variety of tools to engage students in virtual learning. Students will be expected to check in each day and complete the work for that day to be counted present. We will have to still take attendance in this model. Written assignments will be sent home on the days that students attend school and return on the next in-person school day. On those virtual learning days, I want to reassure parents, students will not be in front of a computer all day. Schedules will be created for each class so that students know when there is a live virtual lesson offered, and then some lessons may be pre-recorded to be watched at the convenience of the student.
Thank you, Ms. Rogers. Technology support, device and mobile hotspot. All students in grades pre-K through 12 will receive a division-assigned Chromebook or laptop. Students are expected to use their division-assigned device for the 2020-2021 academic school year. A device guide will be provided for students and parents that will outline our device agreement, at-home care, troubleshooting tips, and device shortcuts. Mobile hotspots will be available by request only and will be distributed by households as needed. The mobile hotspot will provide at-home internet access for connectivity. To request a mobile hotspot for the start of the 2020-2021 academic school year, please contact 434-848-3844 3138, extension 4026. Student access. Students in grades K through 12 will be required to use their division-assigned Google account, G Suite, for remote learning. This will allow BCPS to ensure the safety of our students while providing online support. Their G Suite access will include the following Google platforms: Classroom, Drive, Docs, Forms, Sheets, Meet, etc. Instructional and technical support. BCPS Google Sites webpage and instructional materials are now available for print. Monthly virtual parent technology Zoom calls with Q&A sessions will be hosted as we start the 2020-2021 school year. Homework hotline will be available. Device and mobile hotspot online protection and support hotline will be available, as well as guest Wi-Fi networks at all 5 school locations. Please note that the guest Wi-Fi network will be available 7 days a week from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Email and online safety. Students in grades 6 through 12 will have access to a division-assigned Office 365 email account. To ensure online safety, all students in grades 6 through 12 will be required to use their assigned account for remote learning. We will not allow the use of personal email accounts.
So thank you, Mrs. Pearson, and thank you, Mrs. Rogers. Right after this, there is a survey that's posted on our website and social media pages to gather your input and feedback on this plan. Please take the time to respond to the survey. It's critical to the success of this plan. We are encouraging you to have your responses to us by Tuesday, June 23rd, 2020 at 8 a.m. And the rationale behind this is we have an opportunity during our administrative retreat next week, and even thereafter, there's a day after that Mrs. Rogers is working with the instructional team to really go through your data and feedback so that we can make adjustments to these plans to make sure that they continue to be instructionally sound and that we can provide proper instruction and services to your students while still keeping them safe. So we definitely need your feedback. It only takes maybe 5 to 10 minutes to complete the survey, but it is so critical to our planning and our work and the success of our students for next school year. Also, there's going to be 2 parent meetings on July 7th, where one during the day and then one in the evening for families. We recognize that you work varying schedules so that we can roll out what our final plans are with parents based on your feedback. So your feedback is definitely critical, and we want to make sure that all groups are represented. I would like to see if my lovely panelists have anything additional that they would like to add. If not, I just want to do a few thank yous and close this out.
Not at this time.
Okay.
No, ma'am.
All right. Well, as always, I want to say a few thank yous. First, parents, thank you for really just entrusting us with your most valuable resources, which are your children, and providing us with feedback. We can't wait to get your survey responses, and providing us with feedback as we need to make adjustments to these plans. I still want to note, understanding that it still has to be within CDC guidelines and with the guidance that we received from the State Department of Education, and within what VDH, Virginia Department of Health, will approve. So with that, I just want to, first, I'm going to thank this team of ladies. 2 of our other members of the executive team are not present on the call this morning, but they've done a tremendous amount of work behind the scenes. Miss Mallory, I know she's in meetings today, and as well as Miss Brown with personnel, who's out delivering contracts this morning. I also want to thank the school board, who has participated in countless meetings, whether it be our special sessions, as we work through through our plans and through, the financial aspects and instructional aspects as we've gone through this global pandemic. Also, an extra special thank you to our board instructional committee, Ms. Seward and Dr. Burns, who've spent countless meetings with us as we comb through these instructional plans and just sort of chatting with them and getting their feedback from that perspective. To all of our administrators and teachers and the task force teams that has spent just countless hours developing these plans, even before the governor provided their guidance. They had their boots on the ground doing everything that needed to be done. All of our school nurses, just everyone with the screenings from beginning to end. This has been a very interesting time. So again, parents, we thank you. We look forward to your feedback. We can't wait to receive it. And please just give some thoughtful consideration as you give your answers so that we are able to develop the best instructionally sound and safe plans for your students. So thank you all, and we look forward to hearing from you.